Hello and welcome to Deep In Pact, a proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
Yes, I am Ruben Morehouse, and we are back to talk about Null 9.x, an interlude. An interlude that we don't know who it is at the start, which is a fun little thing that happens with about half of the interludes, I guess.
Yeah, I do always enjoy the ones that are a bit of a puzzle at the start as you're trying to figure out like who or what it is.
Yeah, maybe when we get up to the point where you find out who it was. Well, when did you... Because I kind of started suspecting when people started getting inebriated, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm the same. It was sort of when all the, what we eventually realize, like the... acolytes of Dionysus start joining the party. I was like, oh, this is Jeremy Meath. Of course, I thought the older guy was Jeremy Meath and we were closer to the present, and it really wasn't until the very end. And I think that was by design. Like, I think I fell for a twist that was meant to be laid out like that.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, it is a histories arc that you usually you see them before they, entered the story.
Yeah, I did. Well, when it sort of revealed that Jeremy's a little kid, I was like, oh, of course, it's histories. Oh.
Anyway, let's dive into it. So this chapter begins with a kind of shabby man approaching a group of partying youth and giving them a free case of beer. Nice guy.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. Like, this whole opening sequence to me felt like the opening shots of like one of those Monster of the Week type
a real
shows.
Cold open where you're like, that person? Oh yeah, they're gonna die. You kind of know just because you're watching the show that the person you're following is going to end up dying, and then Sam and Dean have to come in and kill the vampire or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's it plays to that sort of trope really well and twists it like on a number of levels. Like even before you know who's who, the imagery of this sort of older, worn down man, and like a young, lively group of rebellious youths. Is, I mean, that's sort of tapping into this cycle imagery we've had throughout the story of, the old people kind of being worn down into the system and young people thinking they'll change it. And
interesting, yeah.
Like, I don't know, I see some similarities to a lot of other things we've seen in Jacob's Bell and some of the other histories arcs.
Yeah, fair enough. The thing I like about the start of this chapter is, we are so set up to think these kids are going to die. But actually, it all kind of just is fine in the end. Like, nothing too bad really happens to them as far as we can tell. Like, they don't get killed, they don't get abused. I don't know, they're just kind of fine.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because when the smallest boy sort of starts to figure out something's not right and he's going to leave, I was like, oh, he's going to cop it the worst or get it like first.
This is going to be the catalyst that turns it all bad. But no.
Well, yeah, I mean, arguably, yes, he did still cop it the worst. I mean, I guess it might depend on who you ask, but in general, I'd say being awoken and all that is generally not considered ideal in a lot of ways. So I mean, Jeremy as a young boy kind of proves himself quite smart, and he's almost punished for it in a way.
Yeah. So this disheveled man says to these kids, because once upon a time I was where you are now, and a man did this for me. I'm hoping that one day you kids will be in a position to do it too. So it kind of feels like he's explicitly here to recruit an acolyte. And he kind of mentions that he's looking for an acolyte later. I wonder if he is targeting Jeremy or he's just kind of holding auditions. I don't know.
I almost think it's like he's open to the idea, but also like he just gets favor from going out and getting teenagers into drunk orgies. So, he is in a position where he's hoping that one day the kids will be going out and doing it because karmically that might still be tied to him, or the Dionysus will understand that he started this trend. Yeah,
fair enough. Get him into the partying lifestyle.
Yeah.
So these youths party and hardly even notice when a gaggle of beautiful men and women come and join their party, except one boy notices and kind of, in air quotes, confronts the disheveled man. I don't know, but this is the thing I want to touch on, because it's not actually clear what Jeremy's doing at this point. He kind of starts to slip away, maybe to run away, maybe to get help, but kind of is interrupted by the man and then just starts listening to him. It's hard for me to get a read on what Jeremy is trying to do here at this point.
Yeah, so because I think a big theme of this chapter for me is who is Jeremy loyal to? Uh, sort of Jeremy's allegiances or motivations are sort of a big thing in his interlude. I mean, obviously. But like you're right, when you sort of read carefully, there's actually no indication in the narration that he was like had any plan except for just like getting the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
Like he sets himself up as somebody who watches over the group in a way and cares for them, but like when the shit hits the fan, it does kind of seem like he was just getting ready to run.
Well, yeah, I'm kind of curious about that because you're right. He explicitly says like I'm keeping an eye out on the group, but then when something happens, I don't like it. That's what makes me think that maybe he's going to get help, but again, that's not really like confirmed in the text. So it's kind of curious, like figuring out exactly what his plan actually was here.
Yeah, and I think this is something the chapter is dealing with, so it makes sense that it's not just like super spelled out right at the start.
Yeah.
I do like how before we know this is Jeremy, like you sort of instantly get a bit of respect and are endeared to the smart little kid who can tell something's wrong. Like you're like, you go, you little battler, and you think he's cool, and then it's like, oh, actually that was Jeremy, and it's like that was like a bit of a twist for me because it was like Jeremy's generally I see him as like this jaded asshole individual, and so seeing him as kind of the young kid is like I think a powerful way to open it because it forced me to go back to the drawing board with my evaluation of Jeremy as a person and really like try to see his perspective in the chapter. Like I think it works really well to do that.
And I guess that's why so many of these histories start like that, is because a lot of the elder characters that we get histories arcs on are jerks. I mean, like, we kind of know them as jerks in the story, and so getting us a kind of anonymous glimpse into their life before they become the jerks that we all know and love really helps kind of, I don't know, deepen them without putting us, without making us kind of antagonists to their story from the get-go.
Yeah, and again, I think it also fits into all that stuff I've been saying about, how everyone's kind of young and idealistic at the start, and
true.
Almost all of them seem to end up, part of the machine.
Yeah. So the disheveled man is a priest of Dionysus and asks Jeremy if he'd like to give his life to a god in exchange for some power and infinite drinks and potentially a shot at greatness, and also a custom-built woman, I guess, is another benefit that is listed.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. We sort of get our first insight into what being like an acolyte of a god is really sort of like.
Yeah.
And I mean, it does seem like a fairly sweet deal if your god's not a total jerk, which it sounds like they all actually are.
Yeah,
because the nice gods get killed off by the mean ones.
It seems easygoing, but I think that's a product of Dionysus rather than of being an acolyte in general, because because basically it seems very much like just kind of do stuff for Dionysus, and eventually if you've done enough stuff he'll do something for you, and that's kind of how it goes. But I imagine that if you're an acolyte of a different god, that would not work out like that.
Well, it'd come down so much to what it's the god of, right? Like Dionysus is the god of like fertility and wine. Like that's pretty hedonistic and about indulging your pleasures. Whereas like if if it's a god of war, like fun is probably not on the cards.
Well, unless it's God of War for PlayStation, in which case fun's definitely on the cards. Go out and get a copy today, guys. But no, you're right.
Wait, are we sponsored by Sony now?
Yeah, surprise. No, you're right though. And obviously a lot of the gods seem to have order as one of their kind of domains, I guess is the D&D term for it. Being very kind of having rituals and stuff, whereas Dionysus's rituals are a lot more of the partying kind. So again, I'm kind of curious why we think Jeremy says yes here. Like, it actually makes me think, like, it's hard to get a good read on him, and he kind of mentions that he's tipsy but not drunk. And it kind of gives me this vibe of, like, Jeremy being seduced by the power of Dionysus. Like, he kind of... There's a line, I think, where it's something like, he got a glimpse at what it could be like, controlling that power, and it was intoxicating. Maybe isn't
dizzying.
The word. Dizzying, yeah. But I think intoxicating is also quite an apt word.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like Nathan, the elder practitioner, is... I don't know... sweetening his words a bit, or sweetening the deal conceptually to Jeremy. That there's nothing really to support that, but I kind of am confused enough by why Jeremy is so blasé about this that it makes me feel like there's something else going on.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, as you said, he's a bit tipsy, and obviously, you could imagine that gives Dionysus a bit of a foothold.
Yeah.
In some sort of magical way. Also, of course, it just sort of alcohol impairs your sort of decision-making, long-term thinking abilities.
Yeah.
Which I think is an important part of being an acolyte of Dionysus. I mean, like I think the reason Jeremy stands out to them is that while he's tipsy, he still sort of manages to figure out what's going on, and that's something you'd need to be able to do as an acolyte of Dionysus, because you need to be drunk all the time. But yeah, my read on it from Jeremy's perspective is very much like, I think you're right. It's a power thing. Like he's sort of been defined to us up until now as someone who's really been making a play for Lord of the City. So I think it's pretty clear that like he's got ambitions for power and all that, and it makes sense that he might have had those even now. Like, he is someone who the idea of getting special powers in favor of a god appealed to.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I'd like to see more of where that came from, because I feel like that's something that has been driving his decisions, but it doesn't feel like, it feels like that's a concept that he just kind of has out of thin air, not a kind of characteristic that was built by something. I don't know. Maybe we
don't really see into his head until after he's already become one of the acolytes.
Exactly. Yeah, I kind of am. This is the part about his history that I'm really curious about, is like why he is like this, where it seems like this history arc just kind of presumes that he is like this already. Anyway, Jeremy agrees to be an initiate, and we jump forward in time. Jeremy is about to do something crazy. He claims a domain and then afterwards asks Dionysus to back him up.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty great.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And like, the section keeps opening with stuff like Nathan, his
dad, his practitioner
master,
dad,
yeah, his prac dad, is saying stuff like, this isn't a system you can just game.
Yeah, but it totally
whatever.
is.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what he's done.
Yeah,
is the hilarious thing about that is he does kind of game the system, and I think it's interesting to look at the longer term implications of that, because it kind of seems like it worked really well.
Yeah, he seems to be
now.
like, I don't know. I guess this is the right place to bring this up. Jeremy has never really seemed very powerful, right? Like, I kind of had him in the same category as Sisters of the Torch, or Elder Sister, where it was like, yeah, you've said you wanted to make a play for Lord of Toronto or whatever, but I've never actually seen any power from you that indicates that you could actually really do that. But then, obviously, we see Elder Sister in her element, and she is powerful enough. And I think this is us seeing Jeremy it to the same extent, right? And later on, obviously, we see more of how powerful he actually can be under the right conditions. He actually seems like he's a pretty ideal candidate for Dionysus. Like, he seems to be very, very good at what he does here.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I was a little confused like most of the time about how he thought he was at that level. Like, Conquest and people like Isadora just seem a step above everyone else, where you're kind of like, I don't understand how someone like the Sisters is meant to rule, and Jeremy was always kind of the same.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is, yes, this gamble here works for him, where he makes the domain.
Yeah.
But as he sort of says at the start, as an acolyte of a god, this is when you get your biggest boons. And he gets a bunch of cool shit. But, 20 minutes after having this domain versus, like, what are we, 20, 30 years later, when we're dealing with, like, Blake and stuff, is he that much more powerful? It sounds like he's accumulated a couple of more objects, but it really does feel like he hit the ground running and hasn't really, kept that momentum. He's kind of stagnated since he did it.
Yeah, and I suspect maybe that's not entirely fair criticism, because it does feel like, 10 or 15 years ago, after the failed attempt, he kind of, like, fell off the wagon to the extent that he didn't keep climbing or even really maintain, like, active practicing.
Presumably Sandra leaving didn't help with that, considering how the chapter sort of ends.
Yeah, so maybe he was growing in power up to that point, and then after that failed, he kind of whatever.
Yeah, that's fair.
But you're right that he like, we see he's got a few more tricks up his sleeve, but he seems about as good as a practitioner as he is now later. Right. Anyway, so Dionysus backs Jeremy's gamble here, sending a bunch of followers and gifts, most of whom actually are Nathan's. So Nathan leaves kind of bitter that he's been usurped and lost faith from his god.
Yeah, and again, I feel like a broken record, but he's replaced his mentor.
Yeah.
Sort of, and he feels like he's doing this big change to the cycle when he does it. He's like, oh, look at me and my sick domain thing that I got. Like, I've done so much, and then we skip forward to where he is today, and he's kind of just cog in the machine.
He's washed
right?
up, yeah.
It's I don't know, like it's just sort of I see this whole chapter as another little example that we've been seeing in Jacobsville of people sort of aiming to change up the system and just ending up falling into it anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is a good kind of thematic through line that I hadn't picked out, but it makes a lot of sense. Jeremy's another example of this, right? And we keep seeing examples of it. I don't know. And maybe the system will never change. I wanted to pull out a line that I really liked when Jeremy has just started his domain ritual, but no challenger is there yet. It says, "The room grew darker as spirits claimed the space. It waited in a state of flux, ready, yet not quite his." There's nothing too deep about this. I just think it's a cool image of like the spirits claiming the domain, waiting to see how the challenge plays out, and the room literally darkens, just kind of hanging in the balance. It's just a fun image.
I mean, it's great. It's great ambiance for the sort of fight scenes that will be coming up. I mean, I love how Pact kind of gets a free pass to do this sort of stuff because of the spirits. Yeah. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So the first challenger shows up, and it is Doug with a young apprentice Diana in tow. And Doug negotiates to play Morabaraba, or for Diana to play, and for him to drink a shot for each piece that gets captured.
I really love this whole segment because like the more we sort of learn about Doug and Diana, the more you sort of realize they're really just here to play the games. Like, yeah,
totally. He's like, so which board game should we play? Whereas Isadora's like, let's fucking fight.
Yeah, like Doug and Diana are just here to socialize, pretty much. Yeah. And like I have this funny image of them like rushing because they have to get there first. Because you can just imagine, like, oh, we got to get there first. Because if Isadora beats us, it's going to be all like serious and shit. Yeah. And he's not going to want to play cool board games if he's just been in a fist fight with the Sphinx.
Yeah, got to get there before Isadora marshes the vibe. So I wanted to touch on Morabaraba because I love kind of finding out about traditional games that are very interesting. And so Morabaraba kind of takes a little bit of this story up, and so I thought I'd give a bit of backstory on it, what it is. Kind of Monster Corner, but for board games. I don't know what we call that. A meeple corner. How about that?
I don't understand the joke you're making there.
The board game heads will get that one.
Okay. But yeah, no, I'd never heard of this game, and I was really glad when you did the research on it because it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. So it's a game that's about arranging pieces, circular pieces, but they're called cows in Morabaraba. You arrange them into rows of 3, which is called a mill, and each time you kind of arrange a cow into a mill, you get to shoot one of the opponent's cows, which just takes the piece out of play. And so basically the core of the game is, it's kind of like tic-tac-toe on steroids, I would say. It's about moving these cows around in order to make mills, which opens up more of the board, which opens up more potential moves, and eventually once you've shot all of the opponent's cows, you win. So this game's from South Africa originally, and it's like I do like the comparison to tic-tac-toe on steroids because it is about like making a line of 3.
It reminds me of like based on the small video you sent me of 2 people playing it. It was kind of like tic-tac-toe crossed with Go.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those kind of traditional strategy games where it's quite easy to understand the rules, like a Go or a chess. Maybe chess is a bit more complicated, but it's very simple. It's all about capturing pieces, but it's got a lot of strategic depth once you've been playing it for a while. So there's a line later on where Jeremy wins this game, where he thinks, once the board was arranged so he could move 1 stone between 2 rows of 2 stones, completing one after the other with each turn, he had Doug reeling. And so what he's set up here is that he's set up 2 rows of 2 and 1 cow that just moves between these 2 rows each turn, making a mill, which captures a piece one after the other, and basically is a pretty tough situation to beat. I just like that Wildbow is like, what are some interesting traditional games that people could play in these challenges, and just finds one and inserts it into this world. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, there's a sort of through line here where Jeremy sort of chalks up the fact that he's able to win this to the fact that Diana is too young to look far enough into the future. Which, I'll just finish it there. I think you all know where I'm going with this now.
Yeah, yeah. So let's touch on Doug while we're here, because he just seems like a cool guy. He seems like he'd be a really nice and supportive mentor, which kind of explains why Diana is so, so kind of respectful and in awe of who he was.
Yeah, he totally lives up to the hype. He's as awesome and wholesome as Diana made him out to be.
Yeah, he's awesome.
For sure. Unless there's more to learn about Doug at the moment, I'm just like, he's just like a cool, nerdy dude who was into magic.
Yep, and unfortunately, nice people don't seem to survive too long in this world.
Nope.
Anyway, speaking of nice people, the second challenger arrives, and it's Isadora, and she says, "Trial by combat."
Yeah, I mean, the fun and games are over, like, the second you find out the next person's Isadora. It's just like, yep, okay.
Yeah.
Serious shit now.
It really dials it up to 11, right? Because obviously we know that old Jezza here is going to survive, but from what we've seen of Isadora's combat capabilities, she's basically on another level. And so it's kind of, it sets it up really interestingly where it kind of feels like he should die here, but we know he doesn't. So what's going on? And it makes a really interesting kind of dramatic irony/tension thing happen.
Yeah, well, exactly. Because, as you said, Jeremy's going to survive, so the tension is entirely coming from how the fuck is he going to do this?
Yeah.
And, I guess we see pretty quickly.
Yes. So he basically asks Dionysus for a gift in order to win, and Dionysus gives him a horn of blood, which he drinks, and he blacks out, and then wakes up kind of battered with having only consumed a fifth of this blood. Basically having gone into a crazy fighting blood rage where he's beaten the shit out of Isadora, and she is subdued enough that she agrees not to contest his challenge, in exchange for him meeting some girls, which obviously is Duchamp's.
Yeah, and he gets a thyrsus, which is, a weapon that was associated with Dionysus, and in Greek culture it's a staff with a pine cone on top. And I always thought that was a fucking weird weapon, but, it 1v1s Isadora pretty well, so I guess I have to take back all my judgments of a stick with a pine cone on the end.
Do you think he, beat her with it? Like, I wonder.
Well, I mean, it can't be a natural pine cone, or it would have shattered.
Right. Yeah, fair. Who knows?
It must be bladed. I guess if the pine cone bits were, reinforced and bladed, that could be pretty serious.
Yeah. So we kind of skip over the bit where Jeremy meets Sandra, but we cut to them basically right after they've gotten married later. But before we jump to that, I kind of want to talk about Jeremy and Sandra, why Isadora wanted to matchmake them here. So it's clear Isadora doesn't like Dionysus, doesn't really like Jeremy, does like conquest, right? And or conquest being in power at least. And so that's the lens that you kind of have to view this through. And so my main two theories are that Isadora wanted Conquest to stay in power and thought Sandra would either kind of level Jeremy out a bit or accidentally or maybe intentionally fuck up Jeremy's bid for power. I'm curious what you think about this.
Yeah, so I think I don't even know if Isadora was thinking that much in terms of the bids for power and Jeremy going for conquest. I think the bit I'm more focused on is just that she doesn't like his god, and I think she, the Duchamps are probably the best people with a chance to get someone who he'll actually fall for, which, they do.
They do, yeah.
And it doesn't go over that well with Dionysus. So I think it's just in general, she just doesn't really like him and his god, so she decides to set them up to sort of weaken his relationship with his god and thus, weaken him. That's where all his power comes from.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'll accept that. They are match made and they end up getting married. And now Jeremy and Sandra are kind of hanging out right after their wedding, kind of enjoying domestic bliss. But Jeremy is a very awkward man and is really not sure how to act around his now wife.
Yeah, I want to pull out this line from when he first goes to see her in this section, where it says, Sandra sat in a windowsill. domain to her left, window to her right, the view of Toronto outside his personal realm and temple. And I mean, yeah, we just had that whole talk about what left and right hands mean. So it's hard not to read into this imagery, and there's a whole paragraph then about how she's kind of indifferent to everything in the room with her. So she doesn't feel super invested or like into it at this start thing. Like I can see why Jeremy is struggling to see her interest or to decide what kind of tolerance she is engaging in here.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess reading that, the left-handed side of her facing towards his domain and him and all his servants is showing some indifference, passiveness.
Yeah, that was sort of my read on it. She doesn't seem that into it in this section, I guess I'll say. Like, tolerance seems like a good word.
Yeah. So the other thing we find out from this section is that Jeremy was trying to get Sandra to say no to his marriage proposal, which kind of explains why he was such a dick to her back in that scene where they met. But she said yes, and now he doesn't know what to do, which I really like.
I mean, like, that surprised everyone when she said yes, I think.
Yeah, especially her, I think.
And yeah, I mean, it recontextualizes some stuff a bit. I think he was kind of open about the fact that he wasn't interested when he came. But what we really sort of see here is that, yeah, he was caught off guard by Sandra in more ways than one when this happened. And obviously, we've seen this from her point of view, so we know kind of her thought process as she came into this, which was, I need to do this for the family. So yeah, they're sort of come at this both from very different but equally surprised sides, I think. Yeah,
it feels like a big coincidence that they both just happen to be kind of fall into saying yes, which is interesting. But the other thing about this section is Jeremy, you kind of really do get the vibe that he's becoming quite fancy on her, right? Like, he's becoming warm to her, as Isadora would say. I want to read out a section here where he thinks the doubts didn't disappear, but they didn't sit as heavily as before. This wasn't love at first sight, infatuation, or even falling in love, careening head over heels into love's grip. He did think, however, that there could come a day, not tomorrow, not in a week, a month, or maybe even a year, when he did love her. Which is basically him thinking, I'm not falling in love with her, but I think I will be in love with her, which does mean that he is falling in love with her, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, he's just so fucking poorly equipped to deal with genuine emotions.
Yeah.
It's kind of adorable. Like, he just... Yeah. I agree. I think he's already kind of falling head over heels for it. He's been so hollowed out by years as an acolyte of Dionysus, he doesn't really understand what's happening.
Yeah, I guess he would be pretty desensitized to... I don't know, like romantic emotions just from being an acolyte.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting. I guess we'll talk about this now. Like, I went back and reread 3.x, or all the bits with Jeremy, in 3.x to sort of tackle this chapter. And there's definitely, I mean, Sandra was very much coming at their relationship when 9/11 happened from this perspective of she knew that the best way she could help him was through just sort of being his companion. Like, there wasn't much physically to their relationship. It was definitely much more of an emotional one. Yeah. And we sort of see here the seeds of that being laid as Jeremy comes to terms with the fact that he can actually have, like, feelings.
Yeah. I'm just going to say it now. I really do ship these two. Like, I love them as a couple. I just want them to be together and be happy.
It's interesting. Rereading 3.x, there's definitely an acceptable read of that chapter that says that Sandra didn't have super strong feelings for him and does just sort of see him as another tool.
Yeah,
which
I get that.
Has me worried.
Yeah, I don't know. And that kind of sits with how this chapter ends a bit. But we'll get to that. So we kind of jump forward in time again, and Jeremy is heading to Jacob's Bell for the Lordship contest. And he's packed tight into a clown car with 7 other nymphs and satyrs, and an ibex driving.
I mean, obviously, everything to do with this ibex driving is, like, 10 out of 10 comedy.
Yes,
it's
awesome.
Hilarious.
I would love to see more of them packed into the car. Like, it feels like a very packed as a sitcom scene. And you know what they say about ibexes being bad drivers. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but it does seem like it's true.
I mean, I definitely have the headcanon that he seduced the driving instructor to pass the test.
Yeah.
Like, that just seems like it would be on point
Yeah.
for them. Yeah, I mean, it's always funny when we get others doing, like, benign human things, and this is a great example of it, I think.
Yeah, you're right. It's good. But
yeah, well, obviously the main section here is Jeremy is kind of miserable leaving Toronto. Like, he doesn't do this. He doesn't leave Toronto. He's not enjoying this trip, but he's doing it for Sandra.
Yeah.
Who he may or may not have feelings. He definitely has feelings for.
It is set up how much of a struggle it is for him to move around in Toronto because he's kind of lost Conquest's favor, which is interesting. It's kind of implied that he can, like, teleport around Toronto most of the time.
Yeah, well, he just says, "Oh, I used to be able to travel, but now I can't. I have to have a car." And I was like, "Okay, so what the fuck does travel?"
Yeah, exactly. Mean, what does travel mean? Yeah.
That's clearly there's a meaning to that word I do not understand.
Yeah. So they arrive. They don't crash too much. They arrive. And they rock up at Johannes's domain. Actually, I almost said dimension, but that's not too far off. And they ask, Jeremy asks Johannes for residence while they're here. Basically, like, hey, can I stay at your domain like all the other, out of town others do? And it's Johannes is clearly confused because he is clearly here to, be allied to Sandra against Johannes in this contest. So it's an interesting one. It's an interesting bit of a trick.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clearly from the get-go a sort of fact-finding mission, with the idea being that, that obviously cuts both ways. So there's that whole thing with the practitioners being forced to feign civility in all these things, or not really feign it, but, be obligated to be civil. Which, I mean, I just love how this world and the fact everyone has to tell the truth kind of means that shit like that can happen.
Yeah, it feels kind of ballsy from Jeremy to just rock up and be like, I mean, yeah, you know that I'm helping Sandra, and I know, but we don't have to say it. Like, let's just be chill.
Yeah.
And Johannes is confused, but ultimately kind of agrees. Just because, like, you get the sense it'll be less effort to just go along with it and maybe get some info. So Johannes agrees, and Jeremy and co head to their new apartment, with all the satyrs kind of sniffing out the local others along the way. You get a little rundown on who some of Johannes's leashed dogs might be.
And I always love this stuff, so let's talk about this. Like, genies sound cool. They're kind of like more Isadoras, which should be a lot of fun. Also, apparently they work on like a macro scale. Like, I think the example is like moving mountains and building castles in a day, which I mean, seems to hint to me that they may have been involved in Johannes's domain creation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If he was abusing some genie magic, that would be an explanation as to how he did what he did.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's also a very big ghost.
Yeah, who knows what that means?
The vague simplicity of that statement makes it so ominous. Like, that's the most terrifying thing. It's like, oh yeah, sure, genies can move mountains and shits, but this ghost is very big.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, you're right. It's fun. It's such a weird thing to just drop in there, and I hope that means we'll see it later.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of tweeted about how I have the suspicion that Jeremy has a plan with his domain. Like, I wonder if he's gathering, like, with his other theme park, with all the ghosts, or the vestiges or whatever. Every time one of them leaves an imprint in his domain, presumably he has the ability to sort of capture it. And I wonder if he's just like capturing hundreds of small impressions and building like a super ghost.
Yeah, because we did see the shepherd do something similar where he used a lot of ghosts to power up one ghost. So maybe
he had
something
like
else
ghost
going
bombs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I'm worried that Johannes is sitting on like a nuclear ghost bomb thing.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows what a ghost nuke would look like? It's crazy. We also one of the satyrs smells out what is pretty clearly Blake. Blake having passed nearby Johannes's domain, which is interesting because to me that is kind of point saying that Blake isn't traveling through mirrors now. So I'm kind of confused now. I don't really know what's going on with Blake.
Yeah, I've sort of given up on trying to figure it out. I'm just gonna
Wait and see.
wait till tomorrow when I get to read the chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an interesting thing here. So obviously they call him a wraith vestige,
Yeah.
which is interesting. Yeah, I have to go and remember exactly what wraiths were all about. They were kind of like twisted up ghosts, right? So that has interesting implications for where he's at mentally.
Yeah, definitely.
But I wonder if he makes this list because he actually smells like powerful enough to be worth mentioning, or if the abyss has just made him really stinky, so he stood out.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, he doesn't seem super powerful from what we've seen of him, but he did take down so he's at least more powerful than a minor demon.
Well, he didn't take down her. He escaped from her.
He said it was a victory, and I'm just going to take him at his word, all right?
Yeah, I mean, he can't lie.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, obviously, as we get more into Blake in Arc 10, it's going to be interesting to see what more practical effects his otherization will have had on him.
Yeah.
Because obviously he's full of spirits now. He's like fully an other. Like he's probably going to get abilities because I don't know. Like, can he practice anymore? Like, we have no idea sort of where he's at ability wise.
We don't know if he's actually a practitioner still. It's kind of hard to tell.
Or is he a practitioner with other benefits? Like, we just have to wait and see. Also, is he in the mirror world or not? Like, we know nothing about where he's at, really.
Yeah, considering we just had a whole arc devoted to it, it's kind of it's strange that we really don't know. So the other detail I like here is Jeremy in his toolkit in the back of his Impala there under the fake back. He has a horn of ale that could drive a man into a killing madness, half finished. Which is interesting because last time we saw it, it was 1/5 finished, which means he's drunk a little more of it since then.
It's a nice little detail, isn't it? To just sort of flesh out the gaps in the history. There's just some implied, a couple, presumably at least one or two other times that he has had to tap into.
Presumably during the bid for power in Toronto, maybe somewhere else as well.
I mean, God knows.
Yeah, it's fun. So Jeremy rocks up at the Duchamp house and kind of waits outside. He's still that same awkward kid, right? He doesn't go up to Sandra. He just kind of waits for someone to notice him and then tell Sandra that he's here. But eventually that happens. She embraces him and she asks for his help again in defeating the Thorburns.
I mean, it's kind of crushing when he's all like, "Oh, you need me," and she's like, "Not really. There's just some shit that's gone wrong," and it's a very business call.
Yeah.
And he's clearly kind of hurt by that fact. Like, he's still going to go through with it, but I mean, he's so in love with her, and I'm not getting the impression that Sandra's feelings for him are anywhere near as strong.
Yeah, I know, but I can hold out hope, can't I, Elliot? Can't I hold out hope that these two end up together?
I mean, I'd love to be wrong because, like, I agree. I think they kind of work for each other. But I mean, there's this sort of I worry for the Thorburns now because I kind of feel like Jeremy's going to be out to prove himself.
Oh yeah,
and
he's got something to prove,
and he's going to be angry now as well. So I think he's gonna come at them pretty full on. Yeah.
Another interesting note: Sandra never forgot about Blake or remembered him now or something, which kind of makes sense. Obviously, she's an enchantress, so it makes sense that she would guard her connections, I suppose, which means that would have the most trouble cutting through those or wouldn't have been able to cut through them.
Or she has safeguards for when a connection is cut, that it doesn't have the same effect on her internally.
Yeah, totally. So that's a fun little beat.
It does make sense. I think also it was implied that distance was a factor. I think Miss Lewis talked about that earlier in the arc. So, yeah, like she may have had an easier time of protecting against it than, say, Isadora, who was like, 30 meters away or something.
Yeah, true. But it is, distance is a factor, but we haven't seen any hints that, like, Johannes knows about Blake, which I guess we haven't spent that much time with him, but it might have come up in the Mags arc. Anyway. And that's where the chapter ends. And on the whole, I quite like this chapter. I do actually quite like Jeremy as a character.
Me too.
And I'm excited to have him kind of back in play. He was kind of set up to do something potentially back in Toronto, but then that kind of never realized, which maybe was intentional or maybe was just the story kind of started going in a different direction. Either way, I'm keen to have him back again.
Yeah, I definitely spent most of like arcs 5, 6, and 7 waiting for the Jeremy shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And then it never came, and over arcs 8 and 9, I kind of forgot about him. So it was definitely really good to have this interlude here to kind of be like, oh shit, yeah, Jeremy, like we haven't had that shoe drop yet. And now we kind of see it here.
Yeah.
I think this was always what was probably intended, because he's been tied to Sandra since that's how we met him, is in Sandra's interlude.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, he's back on the board, and let's see what he does. Now, before we wrap up, we've reached the end of another arc, so let's just kind of do a quick lap around and see what we thought about this arc as a whole. So obviously, Null, the concept of nothingness, is obviously an apt description for the abyss, and Blake's kind of journey to pull himself out of being nothing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the Drains spends all its time trying to grind you into nothing.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty straightforward connection.
Yes, but the other one, the secondary meaning that I think is one of the primo ones in Pact so far is contracts, legally, contracts becoming null and void when they are terminated, when contracts expire or, become invalidated. And obviously that happens a lot this arc, right? Like, Blake as the Thorburn heir is kind of a contract that is nulled. Blake as a client of the lawyers, nulled. Blake's kind of karmic record seems to have been nulled, or his status as a practitioner at least.
Good.
Yep,
that's a good thing.
All his connections nulled, and his past nulled. So Blake really, every kind of rule that has applied to Blake so far has basically been snapped off, which is what makes me think that, he was able to lie in the abyss, and we don't know if he's a practitioner or not anymore, but it kind of feels like he's not a practitioner anymore, just because that would fit the vibe of all the contracts he made having become nulled, which also means, if that's true, Evan is no longer his familiar, so we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what exactly has happened all there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously, overall, this whole arc was about the Drains kind of grinding Blake down into nothing, and he sort of reached there in a way when he found out his past was all fake, and now he's sort of begun the task of building himself back up.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jeremy is also, obviously, as the interlude character of this arc, he fits into this in an interesting way, because he was kind of hollowed out years and years ago by being an acolyte of Dionysus. But there's still a hint of humanity or human emotions in there with his feelings for Sandra.
Yeah, and kind of being human, I guess, is a through line throughout this entire arc, right?
For sure. Where
Blake is talking about fighting very, very hard to maintain his humanity, but then kind of realizing, nope, you don't have any humanity because you're not a human. So he kind of starts casting it off at that point. And we obviously see Jeremy kind of struggling to walk the line between being an actual human being and being just a priest to Dionysus.
I mean, a through line of the whole story has been like, what exactly is good and unique about being a human.
Yeah.
Like by becoming a practitioner, you already make yourself a little bit other, is something that we've been told numerous times. And I think Jeremy is maybe a case where we're sort of seeing that in action. In that sort of less monstrous or physically monstrous way. And then obviously that very much applies to Blake this arc as well, as he literally finds out that he is other.
He became too much of a practitioner.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's Null, and that's the end of this arc and the end of our episode talking about it as well. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you want to leave us your thoughts on Null 9.x, or Null in general, or this show in general, the best place to do that is in our discussion threads, which will be linked down in the bottom of the episode description there.
Yeah, but if you're sick of this show, if you've just said, no, 9 arcs, that's enough.
Me too, am I right?
So you go.
Mood.
But, head to doofmedia.com, and maybe there'll be something else that tickles your fancy.
Yes.
I think... Vow to View is just wrapping up and is about to transform into What You Say. Which
is that what they're going with? On the calendar, yes. It's still called the OC, but spelt not how you would expect.
I'm fairly sure. I'm fairly sure they've changed the name to What You Say. And I'm very excited.
I'm going to come in with a hot take here, Elliot, for you. Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap, that song, that What You Say song, is a bad song. Like, It's like 3 minutes long, and the first 2.5 minutes are all build up to that one moment where it goes, what you say, etc., etc. And the first 2.5 minutes are so boring. Anyway, Imogen Heap hot take coming at you.
I've honestly never listened to it.
Yeah,
the only reason I'm aware of the song is because of the OC memes from SNL.
Yeah, I don't know how anyone who was picking the music for the OC made it 2.5 minutes into the song, when then they would be like, oh, this is a good bit. Because I would have given up ages before that. Anyway, hot takes aside, actually, if you're interested in hot takes, Duff Media is the place to go, because something that's just started happening is every month, Scott and Matt will be posting some, hot takes maybe isn't the right word, but media criticisms and analysis as kind of some written bonus content for patrons at the $10 or above level. So if that's something you're interested in, go to the Doof Patreon and support it.
Yeah, in fact, we should take a moment, because the Doof Patreon tiers have just sort of been completely revamped. Yes. So, you should definitely go check out the page. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. But there's a whole new $5 tier.
Yep.
With some cool new perks.
Yes, that's the Doof Dancer tier.
Yes, and then as Ruben said, we've added some extra bonus content stuff to the $10 tier that includes Scott and Matt. Sort of, I think Scott mostly talks about stuff he's seen that he doesn't get to talk about on the podcasts, and Matt talks about like philosophy and all of his like crazy insightful opinions on the universe that I always love reading about. So I'm very excited for those.
Yeah, so there's some cool changes. Again, the place to go there is patreon.com/doofmedia. And hey, while you're on Patreon, why don't you check out Wildbow's Patreon? Because, of course, I think it's fair to say that the Doof Media Network would not exist in the state that it's in without Wildbow's works. So why not throw him some money as well at patreon.com/Wildbow.
Yeah, because if you're an acolyte of Dionysus, you get like a case of beer with unlimited cans, and if you're an acolyte of Wildbow, you get stories that keep having more words, and they're all really
unlimited
good.
Chapters. Yeah. So become an acolyte today, I guess is what we're saying.
Yes.
Similarly, you might want to become an acolyte, and by that I mean a follower, of our Twitter, which is @MediaMDPodcast, where you will see our tweets, including Elliot's live tweeting of Pact, which will be happening sometime after you've listened to this.
Yeah. It should be about 24 hours after this episode airs.
Yeah. That's Monday night for Australians, and if you're not Australian, I don't know.
Well, the live read will be Tuesday night.
Oh, yes.
For Australians.
Okay, my mistake. Anyway, so all kinds of great things you can do. Go to doofmedia.com and you can check out most of these links. And otherwise, we will see you on Friday the 16th as we kick off Malafide Arc 10 with 10.1. And we'll see you then.
What the heck does Malafide mean?
I don't even know if I pronounced it right. Maybe it's Malified. Who knows? Anyway, we'll find out. Bye.
See ya.